Imagine for a moment that you're about to wake up from a deep sleep. Now picture that when you open your eyes, you don't know whether you've slept for 10 minutes or 10 hours. Your mind can't distinguish except for small external cues. Perhaps the sunlight coming through the window or the phone buzzing, bringing the current day. And what if I told you that, in a way, this also applies to death? Death, this mystery that frightens so many, could actually be much calmer and less terrifying than we imagine. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will change how you think about the end and what comes after. Our body, in a fascinating way, doesn't know the difference between a 10-minute sleep and an 8-hour sleep. When you wake up, the feeling is the same. You feel refreshed, but you don't know exactly how much time has passed. That brief lapse of time you don't perceive is, in fact, a reflection of our limited perception of reality. It's not about how much time has passed, but about how you feel in that moment. And if you think about it, death could be exactly the same. Now imagine this. You slept for 24 hours and 10 minutes. When you wake up, your mind doesn't know that a whole day has passed. It will only know when you look at your phone, see the date on the calendar, or hear what others have to say. But deep down, time is irrelevant to your consciousness. The experience of being alive is unique, but also limited. What I want you to understand here is that the way we feel time when we're awake is completely different from how it's perceived when we're asleep or unconscious. During sleep, time seems to simply vanish. When you wake up, you don't know if minutes or hours have passed, and death, with the same logic, can be seen the same way. You turn off, and when the turning off happens, the perception of time vanishes. There's no longer a sense of waiting or duration. What remains is an instant tranquility. Often the discussion about what happens after death becomes fertile ground for fear and uncertainty. Spiritualists believe in reincarnation, the continuation of consciousness in another body, while Christians speak of waiting for the return of Jesus, an event that will reunite all those who have died for new life. But philosophically speaking, and here's where the key to the reasoning lies, your consciousness wouldn't know if minutes, hours, days, or even 1,000 years have passed. What matters is that the consciousness is turned off, and when turning off happens, the perception of time, space, and existence disappears. The question is simple. If your consciousness doesn't perceive time when you sleep, would it perceive the interval between death and what comes after? And more importantly, would the wait between the end of one life and the start of another matter if there really were a next? The answer is that, for your perception, all of this is irrelevant. This concept that death is just an imperceptible transition may sound like a revelation. It might be hard to accept this idea because we've been conditioned to see death as something catastrophic, a final separation. But the truth is, in terms of consciousness perception, death isn't the end. It's just a temporary pause, without the pain we usually associate with its concept. Time and waiting disappear, because your consciousness will be turned off. Just like when you fall asleep and when you wake up, you don't know what exactly has happened. When you stop and reflect on death and what comes next, many of your fears dissipate. Death isn't something to fear because, in a way, it's just a moment of transition. If your consciousness doesn't perceive time while it's turned off, what would death be, if not a brief interval comparable to sleep? Life isn't about what happens after the end, but about what you do while you're awake, while you have the ability to perceive. And this is where the concept becomes even more powerful. Death isn't the end of your perception. It's just a transition between two states, being alive and not being. However, from the standpoint of your consciousness, it's as if the world completely fades away, without pain, without anguish. What comes next for you would have no impact. It's as if you were turned off for a second, and when you turn on again, time and space would be in another dimension without you having noticed. This reasoning, though simplistic, brings relief to many. If death is indeed just an imperceptible transition, this means it's not something to fear. On the contrary, it's something that can bring us immense peace. The peace of knowing that no matter what happens next, the interval of time between the end and the beginning of a new journey is irrelevant to our consciousness. What's most fascinating about all this is that just like you don't feel the hours passing while you sleep, death, for your consciousness, could be just a blink of an eye. It's a quick transition, without pain, without anguish, without the need to wait for something to happen. All that matters is the experience of the present moment. And if you stop to think about it, you'll realize that by reflecting on death this way, you'll feel a sense of peace. It doesn't matter what happens next. What matters is now. You don't feel the passage of time while you sleep, and in a way, death could be that same experience, an absence of time and perception. When you die, your consciousness won't know if seconds or 1,000 years have passed. And that's liberating. Because instead of spending your life fearing the end, you can live with more intensity, more peace, and the certainty that what truly matters is what you do while you're awake, while you're alive. This understanding can be transformative. Instead of seeing death as a fearful end, you can begin to see it as a natural continuation of the life cycle, where time, as you know it, ceases to matter. The fear disappears, giving way to a feeling of lightness and freedom. It's at this moment that you truly begin to live, knowing that every instant of your existence is precious, regardless of what comes after. So, next time you think about death, remember this. It's not something to fear because, for your consciousness, it may be just a brief blink of an eye. What matters is what you do while you're awake, while you're living. When you free yourself from the fear of the end, you become freer to live fully. The peace that comes from this understanding is immeasurable, and it's this peace that truly makes the difference in your journey. I hope you've reflected deeply on this. Death doesn't have to be a monster. It's just a pause in the grand cycle of life. Let's live with the certainty that what really matters is now. We're in this together,